Okay, we're back at it again at day 4, day 5, day 4 I think, on the TR-4. Now the repainting is all dried, and now I just need to clean up a little bit of the cabinet inside, dust it off a little bit, and then put the wiring harness pieces back up on the side here. And I need to do that before I lay the cabinet down so they won't fall out. So I might as well just reattach them where they normally would go. So I'll do that. I'll be right back. Okay, now it's a little while later, and we've got our relays and our cable wiring harness all back on, and there's our repainted part, and the transformer mount is reattached. We'll come back to this later when we get into the electrical and remove the capacitors and clean it up, and then remount the control transformer and replace this capacitor, and probably just test these two to see how good they are. Those are computer grade capacitors, and those things usually, I say usually, are pretty stable. They don't tend to go bad very often. So now, over in the record cabinet, we've got the back plane all tied up out of the way, and now I can work on this rusty part here with the sander and prime it and paint it, and see if we can get this rusty spot under control. Then after I finish that, then we can lay the cabinet down on its back on a furniture dolly, and then I can go to work on all that rust down in the lower compartment. Now that's be a lot easier if it was laying on its back or on a side where I can get the sander and get to all the things I need to get to. It's a little hard to do standing up as it is, because you're working right down on the floor there. Okay, on to the rust. Okay, now we're sanded and masked. Now we're ready to prime and paint. Oh, it looks better already. Now we'll let that dry a few minutes, and then put another coat of primer on it, and then put a coat of paint on it. Now, have our coat of paint on. It's just your basic gray paint, nothing to get all that excited about, but it's cleaned everything up, and the rust is gone, and it ain't great, but it's clean now. and the rest is stabilized and under control. Now I'm going to attempt to lay this thing down on its back on that furniture dolly. Let's see. Well, as I thought, it's wasn't all that big of a chore to lay this down. You know, most of the weight is out of the top of the cabinet, and of course this side is almost completely empty, and so the bulk of the weight is just the module frame. You know, and, so it wasn't much of a task, or wasn't much of a lift after all. But now, if this is down, we can get to the bottom end here, and you can see this needs to be sanded and repainted, and this side needs to be sanded and repainted. That's where the sound deadener for the air compressor was glued to the sides of the cabinet. And over time, that glue, whatever chemical they used, it likes to rust metal. Now, if you look on the bottom here, this would be where the our base bolts to the bottom, and there's a little bit of rust on the bottom that really needs to be taken care of too before the base is bolted back on. You know, you don't want to bolt that back onto a clean base. So that was one big reason I wanted to get this thing over on its side, so I could work on this lower lip and get rid of the rust and paint it before I bolt it back onto the base. Over in the signal cabinet, the big cabinet, this all looks pretty clean. There's not much damage happened here. Just a little bit right here needs to be sanded and a little bit of paint put on it. This would be where the air filter sits. You know, that big aluminum air filter behind the blower motor. And you know, I'm not really sure why it would rust there. There's not really any water anywhere around that. I guess it just decided it was going to rust. So we have a little bit right here in the big cabinet we're going to have to grind out or sand out, prime it and paint it. And the cabinet bottoms need to be sanded and repainted. And then the compressor compartment needs to be sanded and repainted. We have a little bit right there on that cross piece. The underside, this is the part we just painted. That little shelf where the air, the moisture, the discharge tubes come out, the little valves there. The underside of that looks pretty good. It's just the top side had gotten rusty where some water over the years had dripped down from the compressor, the air tank, which is right directly above in the back. So that's what we've got to do tomorrow, is more sanding and more priming and more painting. All in all, it's not bad. I've seen worse, and I've worked on worse, a lot worse. Okay, we're all sanded and primed now and ready to paint. Now, it's not the greatest job. I know it's kind of hard to get in here with a rattle can, but everything got primed, and well, that's the main thing. Well, here we are, finally done with all the painting. And so now we've gotten rid of all that rusty surface, primed and painted, and now I went around the bottom edge with some of that midnight blue, and I don't know if you can see it on this camera or not. It's about the same shade, but it's good enough, close enough, and it'll keep it from rusting. That's the main thing now. The left side was a lot rougher than the right side down low, and so short of, you know, stripping a lot of that skin off, which I don't want to do, I just left the best on that didn't come off the first time around and then painted over it, and at least that'll cover any exposed metal with paint, so that shouldn't be a rust problem now. Anyway, I guess when I let this dry a little while, and it'll be time for the finish up the wheels and bolt the bottom base back on, and we can turn this thing back up on its wheels again, and I'm looking forward to that. This has kind of been a dirty, dusty job, but it turned out in the end very good. We got rid of all that rust and scale, and primered it, and have some good paint back on now. So it's nice and clean and shouldn't have any more problems out of that. It ought to be good for another 60 years. Hey quad folks, well here we are back again another day working on the old TR-4, and today is more or less a I guess a cleanup day and putting some of the things back together today after our sanding and painting and rust fixing. Wheels cleaned up very nicely, and they roll very good now, easily. Whereas before they were, you know, the old grease had dried up and they would roll and they would turn, but they were very stiff and tight. And of course, you know, when this thing weighs 1,100 pounds or whatever it weighs, sitting on top of this and with all that old dried up grease, you know, it ain't going anywhere. And of course, the harder you push, the more force there is on the wheels, and that's when things start to happen, like right there. There's a small stress crack, and that's from, you know, the wheel locked up and pushing, you know, with a lot of pressure to make it roll, and it don't want to roll. And usually that's when metal bends and things break. When you make it do something it don't want to do. So this will be a very good improvement on the mobility of this thing. Just having wheels that will roll freely. Now they're not great, they're, you know, they've got flat places, which, you know, what would you expect if you had 1,100 pounds sitting on you for 60 years? You'd have a flat place or two as well. So I'm not going to worry a whole lot about that. It'll just be a little bumpy ride. Well, now today I'm putting the two wheels back together that were they had little stress cracks in them, and my friend Glenn did a little welding on them and welded those cracks up, and that stabilizes that so it won't get any worse. And I'll tell you, these old 60-year-old wheels, so I'd rather have these old welded back together wheels than anything they're making today. Now we are all back up on four wheels again. Have the base all bolted back on. It's nice and painted now, and we have our rust It's been sanded and primed and painted, and so the record module frame can go back in today. And thinking about that a little bit, I think the last thing we were looking at was replacing the rusty divider, and we had found a spare, a good spare, but I think I've had another idea since then about what to do about that, and that's this. This machine had been high banded to color, high band color, but a KVEC had never been installed. And this is a TR-4 KVEC. It's set up for TR-4. And mainly the difference between a 3 or 4, a 22 or a 70 is one board slot difference. That's basically the difference. And it's a little different in how you adjust it and set it up for a 4 as opposed to, say, a 60 or a 70. And that's pretty much where the differences begin and end on the KVEC. Now, what this means for the frame is we have a dropout processor, and this would be row C 5 and 6, I think. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, that would be row C 5 and 6. So we have a dropout processor module installed already. And so what I'm thinking now, instead of using the spare divider, take this divider out, and that would give us C1, 2, and 3 for the KVEC to slide in. And then, of course, when we reinstall the connectors, the back plane, and we would just we would add another socket, you know, to the back plane for this to plug up to, and then we would have to do the mods, you know, the actual circuit mods, run the wires and all that. Luckily, I've got plenty of that stuff to pick and choose from, so it's just a matter of taking the book and going through the steps and modding this machine for an edition of KVEC. So I think that's what I'm going to do today, is remove this divider out of row C to allow us to plug in the KVEC module, and swap this good one for the rusty one up here in row A. And you know, when we get into that, we may find there's another one that's rusty, and so we may wind up using the spare anyway. So let's get into it. go. And that's a good one. There's no rust on that one. Now, the rusty one. Oh yeah, that one needed to go. You wouldn't want to slide a circuit module in on that. Now the one beside of it looks pretty good. It's got one little dot right there, which we can take some Scotch-Brite and clean that up without any problem. And the one adjacent, well, I don't know, that one may, yeah, we probably ought to change that one too. It's not great, and the one beside of it has a little bit on the top which feels like surface. Well, we're all back reinstalled again, and got our non-rusty replacement dividers installed, and we removed the row C 2 and 3 divider here to make room for the KVEC, this module here. That seems to work. Also, while I was down low in the front, I installed the blower motor. That's the cooling blower for all the modules over in the play side of the machine. And I hadn't checked this motor prior. It looked like it would work, and you know, I didn't have no reason to suspect that it would not work. So I went ahead and just took a chance and put the thing in, reinstalled it, and I have a little cheater cord here that I can plug into a wall outlet. We can get away with that to test that motor because our power supply transformer is not in, so you know, it's not going to overload our wall outlet. Of course, if this thing was all fully loaded, you couldn't plug it into the wall. It would overload your outlet. Let's see. This thing's going to blow. Lots of airflow up top here. Now, that motor is located here, and if you look right above it, here's why. You have the capstan power amp and the head wheel power amp 1 and 2. And then above that you have video out, video proc, and the audio out. And these, especially these and these outputs, are the main, you know, they draw a lot of current and produce quite a bit of heat, quite a bit more than any of the other individual modules. So they get a lot more air on this side of the machine than some of these other modules do, and that's why, is because they get the hottest. They're dissipating a lot of power. What I think I'm going to do is continue on here and put some Scotch-Brite on these module trays and clean them up a little bit and hit it with the air hose. And then on our card cage that bolts above here for all the control cards, do the same for it. Run over it with the Scotch-Brite and blow it out with the air hose, and all these connectors will then bolt back into position on the back of the card cage, and that'll really clean up a lot of this wiring that's just kind of hanging around here